Required Minimum Distributions, RMD for short. At a certain age, the government begins to require retirees to take some of their savings from their deferred accounts and pay taxes on them. Thanks to the Secure 2.0 Act, the ages these RMDs begin has shifted a bit, so they're somewhere between ages 72 and 75 when we will all begin taking these RMDs. Today on the podcast, we want to talk about when to take these RMDs each year and a few things to consider when you do.
This is the Money Master Podcast from Brindle and Bay Wealth Management with Tori Tenhagen, Connie Davis, and certified financial planner Nick Davis.
Welcome back to the Money Master Podcast. Well, Nick, Tori, anything exciting going on today? I know we're going to talk about RMDs, but before we get into that...
That's not exciting?
Nah. I was trying to think of another acronym for RMD just to be silly, but...
Yeah, well, we're talking about RMDs and things. We're trying to be more... satisfy your curiosity, not necessarily make you a technician. And right. Somebody commented one time and said, I had to rewind your podcast a couple of times to get the details. And because it was teaching them to try to get it. Yeah. So yeah, the goal is useful information you can take action on. So
that's so funny. When you said the word rewind, it totally made me think of a cassette tape. You're driving down the car, right? And you hit rewind.
Yeah. What is it now? 10 seconds back. Yeah, hit the 10-second back button.
Yeah.
But, actually, Tori was doing a meeting with somebody not too long ago, and they asked the question, is there a best time to take your required minimum distribution? And she said, hey, that'd be a good show. So we're going to talk about that today.
Okay, so before jumping into the kind of main points we have for the podcast today, a few things to just mention about RMDs. They are based on your December 31st value of the year before. So December 31st, for this year, it'd be December 31st, 2022.
From your qualified
tax-deferred accounts. Yep. Yeah. So IRAs.
401ks. 457s,
403Bs. Yep. And then there's a percentage that is taken from that amount based on IRS tables, which they're different for not every person. There's common percentages, but there's
two or three different tables.
Depending on certain things, you'll be on a different IRS table. But then you take a percentage of that, and that is your required minimum distribution for the year. So you have to take that before December 31st of the year. It has to come out within that year,
each year. Yep.
Unless you just turned the required minimum distribution age, and then it's April 1st of the next year.
So
totally clear.
So you go past December 31st and then April 1st of the following year for the one that was due the previous year.
If it's your first year.
Only on the first year. Okay. Yep. So that's, we have to say that because people, a lot of times we just assume we live in that world, but you want to know, it's got to come out. It's got to come from these accounts. I have to take it no matter what. Right. So everybody knows that. We've had other episodes on what these distributions are like and different strategies for that. But there are some thoughts about, because when you're actually taking them out, it's what time of year should I take it out?
Right. The amount you need to take.
Is it beneficial for me to take it out at the beginning of the year, the end of the year, middle of the year? What are the pros and cons? Do I have to take it out in one lump sum? Can I take it out monthly? Those are the questions that kind of come up.
Right. So
quick question, and you might address this later in the podcast, I'm not sure, but you mentioned a 401k, but do you have to take an RMD from a 401k?
Yes, unless you are working. If you are of the required minimum distribution age and you are working at that active 401k, currently, this is not giving you exact advice because the law could change, but currently you do not need to take required minimum distribution. But
if it's an old one or you've rolled it, or
so if you're 70 something years old and working at that 401k, so that's a reason not to roll a 401k into an IRA if you're still working, because then all of a sudden you have to take the money out every year. Good question.
Yep.
I don't think you meant to ask that, but that way or get that answer, but
I don't think that was necessarily in our notes either.
Nope, that was good.
That was good. Ta-da. Okay, so first thing to consider and think about is kind of what we just talked about with that. The first year you take it. You can take it the April 1st the following year, first time.
Yep.
So something to consider there is if you decide to do that, you're technically going to take two RMDs that year. You're going to take April 1st for the year prior, but also take the one for that year by December 31st. And that's going to throw you potentially into different tax brackets. And there's things to consider at play there if you decide to do it that way.
Yeah, like waiting to the last minute means that I have to pretty much take double the amount out in that 1 year. And if it comes out in that year, then it gets taxed for that year. So you kind of have double.
And it's going to pull in more of your Social Security potentially.
Right. Some more Social Security taxation, Medicare Part B or Part D. Okay. So maybe, get in the habit of doing it by December 31st instead of April 1st, possibly when that time comes. And by the way, the Secure Act 2.0 created these new timetables. And so if you haven't yet taken your RMD ever in your life, well, then if you were born 1960 or later, that new magical age is 75. But if you haven't yet taken it and you're, not born, if you were born before 60? Mm-hmm. I said 1960. Yep, 1960. We're not looking at the chart right now. I'm just kind of talking off the cuff here. Then it's 73. Right? Yeah. And then here we are sitting in the year 2023. If you turn 72 this year, you actually don't take it at 72. You'll actually wait until next year. So this is the only year where there's nobody new beginning RMDs anywhere in the US of A that I'm aware of, it because it's a little bit of a loophole there. So some people, because of Secure Act 1.0, started taking their RMD at 72 years old. So if you've taken it at 72, you keep going. This
is not the first time.
It's not a reset for you.
And it's not the first time the age limit has changed, because it used to be 70 and a half.
70 and a half was the main. So. But I don't think it's going to change again because, never say never, but this was they kind of solidified it here, I would think, 75. So anyway, we were saying about this idea of not delaying your RMD beyond,
having to double it up
because of tax issue.
Year. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So then the next thing to consider about kind of timing and how you take it is that you can take your RMD different ways. You can take it as a lump sum, like all at one time, end of the year, middle of the year, whenever you want to, or you can take it monthly or quarterly. So you can kind of decide, if you're going to need that income. Some people like to take it monthly and use it for their
Depends
needs.
On what they're going to do with it. Yep. So you can take it at the end of the year as long as it comes out
before that December 31st deadline. Yeah.
Some people would argue, well, if you don't take it out to the end of the year, then that gives your dollars more time to grow.
Right, depending on what the market's
you take
doing.
It out.
Or, yeah.
And that could work. That could be true. Market could also go down by the end of the year.
Right, you don't get to guess that.
But if in a perfect world, if it did go up, then maybe that's a good idea at the end of the year. I think from a practical standpoint here, what we have seen with financial planning is it's usually more based on a person's big picture plan and what they want to see happen with their money. Meaning you're usually spending it on something which, like what are you using the money for is usually the reason that they do it, not necessarily trying to just be absolutely mathematically perfect across the board. But it is good to know because people do ask, should I take it monthly? Can I take it quarterly? Does that have to be at the end of the year?
Yeah, and that's kind of a situational and preference thing, really.
Yep.
So number 3, time your RMD and use it to help cover your tax bill. So consider taxes. Obviously, the big point of taking the RMDs is to pay taxes on the tax deferred dollars.
That's what the government wants it for, not us.
The government has made you. Yeah. You're right. That's why the government imposes it. So consider your tax bill and how you're going to pay that for the year, and consider using the RMD for that.
So you could. So when you take it from the IRA, you can have the custodian withhold a certain amount of taxes. So you could be strategic with this. You could actually know what your tax bill is going to be for the entire year, and you could withhold the amount from that amount if you wanted to, outside of what maybe you're withholding from Social Security. Because your income is due, your taxes are due when the income comes out, you could actually, if you took it out at the end of the year, you could actually withhold the taxes, have the custodian send the tax to the IRS. And then it's got the favorable tax treatment. So your actual tax dollars are also sitting in that account for the entire year as well. So that's, having a custodian withhold tax money, you can't go wrong with that, because that's, unless you withhold too much and they send you a bunch of money back. But the goal is to not have that happen. But the IRS gives you more favorable tax treatment when you have it withheld. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could be strategic with that, and let those dollars sit in there a little longer.
So, but again, that's a preference and situational thing of what your tax bill look like and what is it all, you know, what do you need to do for your situation? So number 4, consider how you need to use your RMD, not just for your situation with your expenses and bills and things you might need to use that money for, but consider if you're going to use it for charitable giving.
Yeah.
Because at 70.5, you're available for, or you're eligible for QCD, and you can tie that in with your RMDs, which is the qualified charitable distribution.
Yeah.
Or you're going to reinvest it into you can't put it back into an IRA.
Right.
But you can put it back into a taxable account and get it back in the market and let it.
People have to grasp the fact, sometimes we feel like it's so basic, but you have to pay taxes on this money. You have to sell the stock or bond or whatever it's in, pay taxes on it, remove it from the IRA, and it can never go back in there.
Right.
So.
And it also can't go to a Roth because you
not
can't do
income.
Roth conversions. It's not earned income on that.
Right. So there's things you could do. Most people are spending it for their retirement. But some people are like, well, I don't need to spend that. And so
what can I use it for?
What could you use it for? Well, Tori said qualified charitable distribution is where you specifically have to follow some instructions, but you can get that money, that RMD, directly to a nonprofit organization, and then it does not count on your taxable income. And it does satisfy the required minimum distribution. So that's a charitable thing you can do.
So I just have a couple practical things about the RMD that someone who's coming up to the RMD age might be asking because they've never done this before. It's something brand new, right? So they may ask, how do I even know how much my RMD amount is, right? Which is a great question. And on your statements that come to you in the mail, it will list on your statement what your RMD amount is.
The custodian.
The custodian, yes. Yeah. And you might have more than one account that is required to pay the RMD. So you have to add all those up, right? So who keeps track of this?
Yeah, you can aggregate all those accounts, except, and don't quote me on this, but I believe the only thing it doesn't aggregate is a 403B. So you can add up all your 401ks and all your IRAs, and you can pay the RMD out of one account. And I believe it's except for the 403B. I'd have to kind of double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's the one that you can't aggregate together with it. So,
and there's a strategy to that, to being able to pay it out of one account.
You could, yeah. If one of your accounts is aggressive and it's really down, and one of your accounts is very conservative and it's not down, maybe you pay it out of the conservative.
Right.
Yeah, so there's definitely a strategy to that.
Right, and so like for our members, we help to keep track of those RMDs for you. Once we get close to the end of the year, we let you know, hey, this is the amount that's due. Let's make sure that we pull
I actually
this out.
see that a lot when we're doing financial planning, and I show people, this is your RMDs start coming out. They kind of get this look like, oh no, and I'm like, we're gonna help you. It's okay. Like
because it can be
that.
overwhelming. Yes.
Yeah, it's also important to make sure you report it properly on your taxes, and that you're kind of organizing all your tax documents in a way where you're avoiding mistakes. There's a lot more mistakes in filing taxes
we
than people
haven't
realize.
said this, but there are penalties for not paying it.
Well, right. I was going to ask, what for someone who's brand new, like, oh my gosh, what if I forget? What happens?
Yeah,
there is a penalty. What's the penalty?
Well, it's changed recently. Tori, do you remember? Because it's very new. It just happened.
I know what it used to be.
Well, go ahead.
It used
we'll
to
let
be
you tell it.
50%. It was shocking to me that it was so high.
So if your RMD was supposed to be $18,000, then your penalty was $9,000. Now with the Secure 2.0, it's 25%, and if you fix it, they reduce the burden down to 10%.
That's what I thought. I had 10 in my head.
Yeah. There's no excuse though. Nobody should be paying that
penalty.
Yeah, you should. Hopefully they're paying attention every year.
I was going to say that too. Just because it's on your statement
doesn't mean it's
doesn't
automatic.
mean it's done or something's taken care of.
The other thing, we were talking about those. You can. What do you do with this RMD? And most people are spending it. Some people are giving them as charitable distributions, and then everybody else is resaving it. So you can resave it, but it has to be in an after-tax account. So it could be in the same investments, though it probably wouldn't be recommended because there's tax-efficient investments, and then there's investments that are not tax-efficient. But it could be in the same type of investment. It just has to be in a non-qualified investment account, which gets taxed each year instead of allowing it to defer.
Yeah.
So those are some things people do. And, it is fun to get creative with these, though, like beyond the money and talking about creating meaning in your life and do something interesting with those RMDs, meaning give it to a grandchild or strategically, into a UTMA account for them, or, do something that is specifically and meaningful and purposeful to you. Now that's where it gets fun. It gets beyond just talking about technically avoiding penalties, but actually what is the purpose of the money, right? Because it's all about creating that next chapter in a way that you feel really good about and you're getting the most use of your money. So those are some great points, as we kind of just got done doing our taxes, and everybody kind of looks back and sees what their RMD would have been, only the people who are that close to retirement. So if you're not in retirement, then, this is kind of future information for you. But if you are in retirement, you realize, okay, or if you're a few years away from it, you're like, okay, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, something to start watching for.
Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate you listening, and you're welcome to find out more information on Brindle and Bay at brindleandbay.com.
Nick Davis is an investment advisor representative of Brindle and Bay Financial Advisors, a registered investment advisor. This show is for informational purposes only. Any exposure to ideas and financial vehicles discussed should not be considered financial advice or a recommendation to buy or sell a financial vehicle. You should consult a qualified financial, tax, or legal professional before taking any action. This program is not endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency. Annuity guarantees rely solely on the financial strength and claims paying ability of the issuing company. Insurance licensed in Texas, number 1188639. Brindle and Bay Wealth Management is affiliated with Brindle and Bay Financial Advisors.